Today, we explore a question that is less asked in recent debates on the Middle East. What does China have to do with the Syrian Civil War? Hello, hi, welcome to Panda Politics, where we unpack China's role in global affairs. I'm Lu, a scholar in China's international relations based in Beijing. Syria is a country I've been to 3 times in the past for field trips, so twice in 2019 and again in 2022. And it's completely different from what I imagined. When we think about international powers in Syria, we usually think about Russia, Iran, the US, or Turkey. China itself seems periphery in this, cautious and disengaged, but that is a misconception. Now, if we follow the threads of the war carefully, we find that Syria is actually entangled in China's domestic insecurities, diplomatic repositioning, and the evolving global strategy. But we begin not in Damascus or Aleppo, but in Kunming, southwest China. On the evening of March 1st, 2014, 8 assailants dressed in black stormed Kunming railway station in southwestern China. Armed with long knives, they killed 31 people and wounded more than 140. It was the deadliest terror attack in China in decades, and it shocked the whole nation. For international viewers, let's situate this in familiar terms. Think about the 2004 Madrid train bombings or the 2015 Paris attacks. Those incidents, 193 killed in Madrid and 130 in Paris, were carried out by extremists across borders, inspired or enabled by global jihadist movement. Kunming fit into that narrative. But there's a key twist. This was not a random act of domestic violence. These attackers were on their way to Syria. The group had attempted to exit China via Southeast Asia and then to Syria. When their journey was blocked, they returned to Kunming and launched a so-called jihad at home. Now, this incident demonstrated a frightening reality for Beijing. Syria was no longer a distant war. It was a node in a transnational network reaching into China's own territory. And this was not an isolated case. From 2012 onwards, increasing numbers of Uyghurs from Xinjiang province in China began appearing in Syria. Their journeys follow complex routes from Xinjiang into inland provinces in China, then to the south and then out through Thailand or Malaysia, into Turkey, and across the border into Syria. Now, this movement relied on a patchwork of illicit migration infrastructure, religious and kinship networks, and in some cases, forged documents. Once in Syria, many of these fighters joined the Turkestan Islamic Party, or TIP, as part of the HTS, previously affiliated with Al-Qaeda, operating predominantly in Idlib province. Unlike other foreign fighters, Uyghur militants often brought their families. In towns like Jishra Ashukh, entire Uyghur communities emerge. Now, by 2020, some estimate put the number of Uyghur fighters in Syria between 1,500 and 5,000. Now, I personally think probably 1,500 to 2,000 is a more reasonable number, which is around the same number of foreigner fighters from all over Western Europe who joined Islamic militant groups in Syria. So while China's public posture has long emphasized neutrality and distance in terms of the foreigner fighters' presence, its entanglement is real and politically sensitive. What makes the Chinese case unique is many of these fighters were not just foot soldiers, they became embedded in opposition governance structures. Now that raised alarms in Beijing about what might come next. What if a post-Assad government included individuals that China considered as terrorists? To understand the significance of this shift, we need to recall that before the Syrian war, China had minimum strategic interest in Syria. Trade between the two countries was modest, around $2.2 billion in 2010. China has no military base, no major arms sales, and no ideological affinity with the Assad regime. As the war broke out in 2011, China initially took a neutral stance, calling for dialogue, encouraging a political solution, and even meeting representatives from both the Assad government and the Syrian opposition in 2012. China was, in short, hedging. But everything changed after Libya. In 2011, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1973, allowing a non-fly zone in Libya. China abstained, but what followed was NATO airstrikes and the fall of Gaddafi, a regime change operation under the banner of humanitarianism. And so when it came to Syria, Beijing drew a clear red line. Between 2011 and 2020, China vetoed 8 Security Council resolutions on Syria, more than its total numbers of vetoes from 1971 to 2011. And this marked a doctrinal shift. This was not just about Syria, it's about defending the principle of non-intervention and resisting what China sees as a Western pattern of promoting and justifying regime changes in the region. Yet the real drive for China's deeper involvement was not only diplomatic, it was security. The Kunming attack and the increasing visibility of Uyghur fighters in Syria reframed the war. Syria became the symbol of transnational insecurity. China's central concern became potential spillover of terrorism and separatism back into its own territory. The Ministry of Public Security launched massive campaigns along the southern border, targeting networks facilitating illegal departures. From 2012 to 2015, China reported hundreds of arrests tied to those routes. Meanwhile, China's rhetoric shifted. The Syrian opposition, once treated as a potential interlocutor, was now portrayed through the lens of terrorism and instability. Now fast forward to 2023, Bashar Assad visited Beijing, Syria joined Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese companies began exploring infrastructure, energy, and telecom projects in Syria. But this is not only about development. This is about political stability and security. China wants to ensure that any post-war Syrian government will not support, harbor, or tolerate foreign fighters or separatist narratives. Reconstruction is a means of influence, economic engagement as a form of security insurance. Yet, as of late 2024, everything has shifted again. The sudden fall of the Assad regime in December 2024, culminating in Assad fleeing to Russia, marked a significant turning point. China's foreign ministry issued a cautious statement, emphasizing the importance of stability and safety of Chinese nationals and institutions in Syria. Now, the new Syrian leadership includes elements from HTS and has integrated foreign fighters into its ranks. And this leaves the question on what can be agreed between China and the new Syrian regime. So to conclude, what does China have to do with Syria? In 2010, almost nothing. By 2014, after Kunming and the emergence of transnational jihadist flows, China was on alert. By 2016, it was vetoing UN resolutions and repositioning its diplomacy. By 2023, it was investing in reconstruction. And by 2025, it faced a new strategic crossroad. Now this story reflects something bigger. How domestic insecurities, especially around ethnicity, separatism, and terrorism, can reshape foreign policy. Western countries know this very well. Paris, Brussels, New York, Madrid, each has faced consequences of foreign fighters' returns and cross-border radicalization. China's case is different in form, but similar in structure. Syria has become part of Beijing's geopolitical learning curve. So hope this can give you a different perspective on the Syrian war and its relationship with China. Thank you for watching Panda Politics. Subscribe to follow the series and see you soon.